A journey through the towns of Basilicata, telling a story of thousands of years of history, from inland mountains to a coastline between the Ionian and Tyrrhenian seas. With craft traditions of past and present, and tastes and colors still full of vibrant life. Crystal seas and mountains over 2,000 meters high, an area of almost 10,000 square kilometers and one of Italy's lowest population densities. These are the figures behind a region whose landscapes and history are ripe for discovery.
Of course, in ancient times, this part of Italy was called Magnifica, which was basically to the Greeks what America was to the Europeans. So it was a colony for hundreds of years here in the south of Italy. And to this day, people, if you were to dig, if you were to go to the garden and dig, you will find treasures from ancient Greece.
One of Hollywood's most famous directors has a special link with Basilicata. His roots are here, in a region he himself describes as extraordinary. Some of his family still live in Bernalda.
So we have a region of Italy that is still preserved, that is still authentic, that is still unpolluted, as you would. And I think eventually, and I hope that when people visit Basilicata, that they visit it to see and to enjoy what's here, but that they don't change it. It's my hope and my interest here in Basilicata, here in this beautiful city of town of Bernalda, to help preserve it and to bring prosperity, hopefully, but a prosperity that lets the traditions continue.
Southwards along the Ionic coast, the waves break on beaches of golden sand. Basilicata has been a busy trading area since the period of the Mycenaean civilization. In the town of Policoro, the National Museum of Siritide retains fragments of an ancient history.
Museo Nazionale che ospita importantissime collezioni archeologiche.
This National Archaeological Museum contains very important archaeological collections that come from the two Greek colonies that succeeded each other in this area, the first of which was Siris and the second Heraclea. When the settlers of Siris arrived in this area in the 7th century BC, they obviously found local populations that had already developed advanced forms of civilization.
Per cui appunto le popolazioni locali.
Referred to in Greek literary tradition as Oenotrians or Coni, these local peoples on the coastal strip of Basilicata were groups of farmers and cattle raisers who were already in possession of rather advanced technologies in the fabrication of ceramics, for example, and in traditional forms of craftwork, or in the forms of economic activity and agriculture. The materials found in male and female graves witness the extensive contacts that these populations had both with the eastern Mediterranean basin, that is Greece proper, and with the various areas of southern Italy, and with the Etruscan Tyrrhenian area. Inland from the Ionic coast, Basilicata's roots can be found in a rapidly changing landscape. The Normans founded pasticci in medieval times, but prized ceramics were already being produced here centuries before. The history of Tursi and all these towns is shaped by landslides. Several times the townsfolk have rebuilt their homes around the castles and church. Winding streets lead to villages accustomed to centuries of isolation. The 16th century poet Isabella Morra lived in the Castello di Valsigni. Her brothers killed her over a forbidden love. Noepoli also overlooks the land from its hilltop perch, not far from the Senise Reservoir. The Senise Dam is one of Europe's largest hydraulic earthworks. 500 million cubic meters of water irrigate the fields of the Metapontina and Puglia plain. The green of the fertile valleys between the mountains dominates the scene. Some towns were founded by groups of Albanians fleeing the Ottomans, while others, like San Severino Lucano, developed around the lands used by the monks for intense cultivation. Basilicata offers a wide variety of landscapes, like the high mountain area of the Pollino National Park. Pollino's peak nudges 2,300 meters and dominates an area protected since the early 1990s. In the limestone region of Pollino, Frido's spring water surges out at a rate of 400 liters per second. These calcium-rich mineral waters are a precious resource for the area. Basilicata, in fact, unlike other southern Italian regions, is rich in streams and springs. The canal works allow vegetation and cultivation to thrive. The park is an immense green lung covering almost 200,000 hectares, straddling Basilicata and Calabria. The oldest activity here is sheep rearing. The shepherds of Pollino still make cheese using craft methods. Pecorino is joined by typical cheeses like Padaccio and Felciata di Morano. Every year, a popular festival celebrates the migration of the flocks to the high pastures. The park is rich in beech and fir, but Pollino's real emblem is the loricate pine, with its distinctive knotted branches. It can be best seen rooted on steep slopes in the most inaccessible areas of the rugged massif. Another precious resource lies in the therapeutic power of several plants. Legend says that the immense heritage of flora and fauna is a gift from Apollo and other Olympian gods. The extensive meadows nourish the grazing animals. The best way to cross these wide spaces has always been on horseback. The untouched habitats have allowed many wild animals to survive here, including a number of rare species like the Italian roe deer. The Pollino region is dotted with towns and villages. Woodland surrounds villages like Viagianello and Rotonda. Their architecture shows the traces of successive overlords, from the Normans to the feudal dynasties. With the passage of time, towns like Latronico have lost much of their medieval appearance. Now they reflect the expansion that took place in the 19th century. West of Pollino, Basilicata's vegetation stretches to the sea. For around 30 kilometers, the region lies on the Tyrrhenian coast between Campania and Calabria. Policastro Bay is a series of beaches, hidden coves and sheer cliffs. The ancient fishing villages now live mainly off tourism. The statue of the Redeemer overlooks Maratea's houses and coastline from the summit of Monte San Biggio. 21 meters high, it's the world's third tallest, after the statues in Rio and Lisbon. Travelling inland northwards from the Tyrrhenian coast, we cross the Val d'Agri region. These fertile lands are steeped in history. It is thought that Lauria is named after the laurel plants that blanket the area where the medieval castle was built. In feudal times, the county of Lauria also included Lago Nero. Ancient Grumentum was destroyed in the Middle Ages. The battles between Rome and Carthage led to the ruin of this great city, but excavations have revealed fragments of its past. The amphitheatre is one of Italy's oldest. Marsico Vetere lies on the river Agri. At an altitude of over 1,000 meters, it is one of the region's highest towns. Towards Potenza in the Lucano area of the Apennines, villages like Calvello cling to the mountainside, huddled around the castles that defended the feudal lands from their lofty perch. The fortified tower and defensive walls built by the Saracens in the 10th century still stand in nearby Abriola. Potenza is an ancient city with a modern face. At an altitude of 800 meters, it's Italy's highest regional capital. After the 1980 earthquake, spending on reconstruction has restored its historical, artistic and cultural wealth. In the late 19th century, the people of Potenza built a theatre for their town. Restoration work has allowed the Teatro Stabile to rediscover the elegance and splendor of that time. Since the early 1990s, it has hosted many cultural events. Potenza's cathedral lies within the medieval walls of the historic center. The church has ancient origins, but was rebuilt in the 18th century. Further north in the Santa Maria district, a large courtyard building is the location for the archaeological museum. From prehistory to Magna Graecia, the remains tell of a faraway time of myths, legends, and gods. The nymph swimming with a dolphin, a symbol of fertility, dates from the 6th century before Christ. The works of art and everyday objects depict the mosaic of cultures that have met or clashed in Basilicata. The remains uncovered by archaeological digs across the region show how Greek elegance was assimilated and interpreted by the local peoples. The museum preserves jewels and local craft objects, Stone Age arms and vessels, sculptures, terracotta and ceramic pieces, and Greco-Roman coins. In Potenza's historic centre, the Church of St. Francis of Assisi has a wonderful Catalan-style 15th century door. There are 8 rows of scenes carved in the walnut, following a precise arrangement. They depict musicians, floral motifs, religious symbols, and demonic representations. The church was built in the 13th century at the site of a Franciscan oratory. In the late afternoon, the streets of the city's historic centre fill with bustling life. The Corso Vittorio Emanuele, Via Pretoria, and Piazza Pagano are the beating heart of a community that looks to the future and innovation, but never forgets its roots. South of the city, protected nature once again takes the stage. The Lake Pantano di Pignola Nature Reserve can only be visited between September and March, so as not to disturb the breeding birds. It's an increasingly popular destination for birdwatchers. From the wooden huts along the paths, they can observe the almost 200 bird species that choose Pantano di Pignola as a migratory resting place or nesting site. North of the marshes, the town of Avigliano is well worth a visit. In the late 16th century, it was one of the first towns in southern Italy to throw off the shackles of feudal domination. Avigliano's fame is linked above all to the skill of its craftsmen. Avigliano's knives are called balestre and were a traditional accessory throughout the Vulture region from the 17th to the early 20th century. Balestre were an offensive and defensive weapon, but a status symbol above all. By tradition, even young women carried one, presented to them by their sweetheart. Now the knives of Avigliano, with their ever more elaborate decoration, have become genuine works of art and are sold throughout the world. Near the border with Campania, the houses of Muro Lucano seem to cling tenaciously to the rocks. Like other towns in the region, Muro's history is scarred by earthquakes. Over the past 1,000 years, they have damaged both the cathedral and the castle. The bridge, built by the Romans almost 2,000 years ago, still stands at the foot of the town. The Vulture stretches across the north of the region. At the heart of this green, fertile area, water has filled 2 volcanic craters. The Abbey of San Michele Arcangelo is reflected in the Monticchio Lakes. It was built 1,000 years ago on a site already settled by Basilian hermits. After 2 centuries of neglect, in the 18th century, the Capuchin friars gave the abbey its present appearance. Although the volcano has been inactive for thousands of years, the land owes its fertility to the eruptions of the past. The famous Aglianico grapes are cultivated in the vineyards of Vulture.
Il nostro è un rosso in purezza perché è ricavato.
Our wine is the purest red because it is made exclusively from Aglianico grapes. Aglianico is an ancient variety that probably arrived in Italy at the time of Greek colonization. Melfi too has ancient origins. The region was already inhabited before Roman times, but the town only gained importance in the Middle Ages. The castle was built in the 12th century, when Melfi was the first capital of the Norman kingdom. It was the scene of important historical events, like the Papal Council that launched the First Crusade. In 1231, Emperor Frederick II established the Constitution of Melfi, the oldest legal code for the Kingdom of Sicily in southern Italy. Over the centuries, earthquakes and rulers have played a role in the changing appearance of one of the region's most important castles. After a long period of restoration, the castle of Melfi is now the location of the National Archaeological Museum. The remains on display here bear witness to the skills of Vulture's pre-Roman population, embodied in their objects and works of art. One of the most interesting artifacts is the Rappolla sarcophagus, sculpted in Asia Minor in the 2nd century AD. This imposing work weighs 11 metric tons and was made as the tomb for a noblewoman who probably died in childbirth. The high reliefs depict classical Greek gods. The young woman lies on the cover of the tomb with a dog at her feet, a symbol of her conjugal faithfulness. Like the remains preserved in the Melfi Archaeological Museum, Basilicata enjoys an immense natural and cultural heritage, with many secrets yet to be discovered.